Portion of this video is sponsored by Bird Dogs. Putting out a phone from an established brand is really hard. They have component suppliers, supply chain, engineers, developers, and a ton more. It is a borderline miracle that these tiny pocket computers ever come out at all. And the established players can oftentimes pull from years or decades of experience. What chance then do brand new companies have? Companies that are hiring everyone from scratch and putting together something that's compelling and fresh in the market, but also can compete with Samsung and Apple's of the world. With the Nothing Phone 2, turns out a new company just might have a very, very good chance. So I'm putting together my thoughts for the Nothing Phone 2. I had about 17 Nothing related puns. I'll do you guys a favor, try to keep them at a minimum here. Also, Nothing didn't sponsor this at all, but they did send me the phone to review. If you've never heard of Nothing, I don't blame you. Their Nothing Phone 1, their real first phone, came out last year but wasn't really released in the US. In fact, they were established in 2020 by former OnePlus head Carl Pei. They do have some other products aside from the phone. They have some really awesome headphones, and of course last year's Nothing 1. That was a really good phone. It was an incredible first effort, but it was definitely not perfect. And Nothing is back and taking everything they learned last year and making sort of the whole thing just better. And in my many years reviewing phones, I found that there's some phones that I have to use because it's part of my job and I gotta test. And there's some phones that I cannot put down and I want to keep using. The Nothing Phone 2 falls into that category. And now that this phone is officially available in the US, it might be a phone that you might want to consider. I use this phone for just about 2 weeks, and as we dive in, I want to frame perspective here. So the phone starts at $599, and mine is tested with your middle version at about $700. So just keep that in mind as we go, especially for what you're getting at that very compelling price. All right, so last year we had a pretty capable 778G processor, but it was definitely a mid-range processor. It was good for most things, definitely not good for everything. This year, Nothing went flagship with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 paired with either 8 or 12 gigabytes of RAM. Mine's got 12. You have a screaming fast phone here. Here are the benchmarks if you care. This is a tested processor and GPU, and it feels as fast as any other phone out there, no matter what, including gaming this time, which was definitely hampering last year's phone. Extra horsepower is also really necessary for them to improve the cameras, which was very much needed. It's also pretty power efficient too, packing a bigger 4700 mAh battery. It easily got me through a full day. As you'd expect, everything is crazy smooth, apps open really fast with some new animations that Nothing added on here. It is a very quick phone, as quick as any other flagship phone out there. And that's for maybe the spec nerds out there, but for the general populace, I think camera is a big reason to get a phone. And I think Nothing knew if they were going to have a shot at competing in the international and US markets, they were going to need to bring something better to the camera game. Megapixels are the same as last gen, but that's really about it. So we have a 50 megapixel main sensor and a 50 megapixel ultra wide, which now use AI to detect motion. So I mentioned processor, and here's where it starts to flex more over the mid-range. You've got 18-bit signal processors capable of capturing 4,000 times more camera data than Phone 1. They also now use advanced HDR to capture the same scene in 8 frames with different levels of exposure in the RAW domain, which is up from 3 from the last gen. We also have a 2x optical zoom here. I would have liked 5, but I think that was sort of one of the compromises made to get the price down. Here, though, is the big test. Here are a bunch of pictures, some out and about, some on a family trip to Disneyland. Look at these in a vacuum. Does anything stand out to you? Do these look good to you? Bad to you? They look like your current phone? To me, it does blow out the highlights and kind of crush shadows, but that has been insanely common, especially in the Android world. And I think that this is a classic jumping off point for new manufacturers. So look at this photo from our trip. Pay special attention to the bright background. This is probably a fringe case, but for comparison, here's the same shot from an iPhone. And you can tell this is not the best photo. When you aren't in a fringe case, the photos tend to look generally pretty good. They do skew a bit oversaturated, but overall I think look generally pretty positive. On the front, they also doubled the resolution to 32 megapixel, and those front photos actually I thought looked really good. 90% of photos here look great, but that 10%, I think you are definitely going to want to be aware of. This might be a case of just a new company learning, or just instance of this is a compromise in the name of price. I am not mad at the camera system here at all, and for the most part, I think it's pretty positive. So here is a front-facing video sample. I'm walking. They did a nice job with the stabilization on here. So here's the rear facing at 4K 60. Look how it's handling things like HDR. I'm coming in and out of shadow, how it's handling the sky, things behind me. Well, I think it's doing a pretty nice job. So if there was anywhere where you could sort of pinpoint where some compromises were made, it's definitely going to be in the camera. And these are still huge improvements over what we saw from Nothing Phone 1. It is a fine camera system. I don't think you're going to miss anything drastic. It's definitely not the best camera system out there, but at the price, it is really, really compelling. So it's summer here in Southern California, and it's hot, and it's probably hot by you too. I usually, if you didn't know, I usually wear jeans when we film, but in this old studio before we move out to our new one, the AC don't work, and I gotta be comfortable and not a gross, sweaty mess. Enter Bird Dogs, probably the most comfortable things that I own. Plus the names are legendary. So the shorts I'm wearing right now are Duffy the Vampire Slayer. They also have Gabe Ruth's, Forrest Pumps, Art Fart Knockers, and more that are worth just going to the website and reading for yourself. And these things just fit way better than sort of stiff shorts made from kind of pretty restricting cotton. I think dudes know what I'm talking about here. The stretch khaki is designed to fit slimmer and sort of do to your legs what sort of tight shorts around your arms tend to do. Think of these as like similar to Lululemon, but just generally like more comfortable. They're also good for sports too. They've got anti-stink and anti-sweat wicking fabric. I don't know what it is, but it does work. Plus they sent me this tumbler, which kind of made the whole thing worth it, which I quickly used for coffee. If you want to get this here tumbler for free or one just like it, go to birddogs.com/Rettinger or just use promo code Rettinger to get free said tumbler. But of course, all the information you need is in the description. So I've admitted in the past, I am a display snob. It's really the first spec I check out when I use a device. No matter what else a phone can do, what else it has inside, if your display sucks, it's gonna sort of ruin your experience with it. Like most phones, things have gotten bigger, and it's bigger here. It's 6.7 inches from 6.55 inches. Last year's phone did get a bit washed out in direct sunlight. Nothing Phone 2 fixes that with 1600 nits of peak brightness. Like I mentioned, I took it to a family trip out at Disneyland, and without much shade in the middle of the day in Southern California, the screen looked awesome. That is a just gigantic, much needed improvement and a huge endorsement. It's OLED, obviously, and now with LTPO, it's got a variable refresh rate from 120 to 1 Hertz, which obviously means always on display, which I'll get to when I get the software. And I do just really want to give like a dramatic slow clap to uniform bezels all the way around that are incredibly thin. This is a really good display. It gets bright, color representation is awesome, high refresh rate is gorgeous, always on display implementation is solid. This is amongst some of the best displays out there. If you're a display snob and you're concerned, hopefully this will push all those concerns aside. Nothing really knocked this one out of the park. The design is something that's separating this phone from other phones out there. We've had see-through phones before. This is next level. So the clear back is Gorilla Glass, and it looks so clean, like even down just the subtle nothing branding. And aside from like looking, unique, I think the back holds, I think, is the defining feature of the phone, and that's the glyph interface. It's essentially 11 LED strips, in case you're wondering. It's up from 5 from last year. You can tweak and customize for a ton of usefulness. Useful, I guess, assuming that you put your phone screen down a lot, otherwise it's not gonna do much for you. You can do things like wiggle to see your battery charge, custom light array for certain contacts if they call you or text you, certain light array for apps or notifications, nothing even slowly opening it up to third parties like Uber, so you can see a sort of a countdown with lights until your ride arrives. You can also kind of DJ your own light show as well. Definitely a novelty, but one that I have wanted to use since I got the phone about 2 weeks ago. However, there are times when it has been really, really useful, if not essential. It is a nice feature to have. It looks cool. The back, I think, is something that people talk about when you see this phone. It makes it look unique. There's a lot of rectangles out there with glass backs. This rectangle with the glass back looks unlike anything else out there. And all that I think is awesome. I mentioned at the beginning, this is a phone that I wanted to hold. I was trying to quantify as to why. And I was holding the Nothing Phone 1 versus Nothing Phone 2, and I could finally pinpoint kind of like what it was. The Nothing Phone 1 looked awesome, but it was a flat on the back. I think that's fine. That's the way a lot of phones are. I'm not talking about the edges here. I'm talking about the glass on the back. The Nothing Phone 2, they curved it ever so slightly before it hits the aluminum bezels. And that little curve is super subtle, but makes a giant difference in how good this phone feels in the hand. One of those things that if you have a chance to pick one up, hold it and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. It's kind of hard to convey over video. That aside, the design here is very iPhone reminiscent. In fact, if you kind of covered up the back and couldn't see the see-through part, you'd probably think that you're looking at an iPhone, which I think is a solid design, right? They sell millions of them, but the back and the feel of this phone really make it stand out to me. So aside from the curve, on the right side, you've got a power and lock button, and on the left, you have volume controls, as things should be with phones. Don't at me. The built-in fingerprint reader also worked quickly and accurately here as well. On the software side, I think we've seen a ton of phone OEMs take a pretty heavy-handed approach to Android. Big, thick, heavy skins, UIs, launchers, whatever you want to call them. Oftentimes, the best parts of Android are unrecognizable. Nothing is taking the opposite approach here, and mostly just let Android be Android, with a few actually nice tweaks. So the font in Nothing OS is kind of like dot matrixy. I dig that. The visual theme moves over to their own widgets, which look pretty clean, especially things like weather, or the widget for their own headphones look very native to this. In fact, you can see things like battery control and control other settings right from there. Nothing claims they wanted the use to be like intentional with this phone. For example, there's like a monochrome option, so you're not distracted by the colors of the apps you want. You're not distracted by the red of YouTube or whatever. It's all kind of different versions of black and white. If you want to, you don't have to. I chose to not do it. There are some home screen and lock screen tweaks, but the biggest change is mostly in the camera app. I like the stock Android camera app. This one, let's just say it should look familiar to you. I think it should be pretty apparent. I really like this phone. It's not perfect. I wish we had more optical zoom. You have dual SIM support, but no eSIM. The phone will work fully with all major US carriers, but wasn't picked up by them. So you won't have contract discounts, at least as of this filming, or trade-in offers from them or nothing. They're not offering any parts for home repairs, so if your phone breaks, you have to send it back to them to be fixed. None of that, however, would dissuade me from picking up or recommending the Nothing Phone 2. I love pretty much everything about this phone. And in a sea of rectangles, this is one that is trying to be different, quirky, and unique. I think it really works. If you're looking for a new flagship level phone and don't want to pay flagship level prices and want something with style, you should absolutely consider Nothing Phone 2. I know I will.